Welcome back, everyone. We are in Colorado today. We're at CU Boulder, and we're here with Lloyd Thrall, who is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Readiness, and is now, what is your official title for Hacking for Defense?
I am a scholar in residence here at CU Boulder, and I'm Associate Director of our Technology, Cybersecurity, and Policy program.
Okay, and then we have Hacking for Defense, which is now Designing for Defense, correct?
Only locally. So nationally, Hacking for Defense, I think now 33 universities, and a lot of names that you would suspect, the MITs, the Georgia Techs, but here at CU Boulder as well. We're in our third iteration, and I don't think anyone would dispute we have one of the finest H4D programs in the nation, which we're proud of.
So you've made comparisons, and this is a data-driven plan here?
Yeah, in a sense, yes. I mean, so
or are we just declaring?
Well, all three. I declare, but also, so every year there is a final for Hacking for Defense at Founders Fund in San Francisco. And teams across the country are invited to compete for a spot there. Last year, CU Boulder was the only public university to send a team to Founders Fund. 6 teams from across the nation got to go, 2 from CU Boulder, up against Stanford, University of Southern California, and Duke. So again, the only public university.
Yeah.
We did not win at Founders, but we were in that tight circle.
Okay, so it's backed by data.
That's right. That's right. And then here, actually, if I could just plug, and forgive me, I'll gush on H4D as long as I can. But I think the real measure of success is not Founders Fund. It's not any of these things. It's look, we care about 2 things. And everything else is detail. 1, are we creating future leaders in the state of Colorado? Are the 56 students who invest their time in us, are they walking away 16 weeks later more ready to become leaders in society? Today's great student is tomorrow's CEO, CTO, congressperson. So that's job 1. And then job 2 is, are we creating, no kidding, value for the national security actors who trust us with their problems and invest their time in us? And I think we're winning there too. And in fact, just last week, we had one of our teams come back from their second visit to the Pentagon requested by the Joint Staff. So that for us is a Super Bowl, at least as much as Founders Fund or what have you.
Well, so let's walk through the format of this, right? So someone who's listening doesn't know what this program is at all. So let's back it up and help me understand the structure. How does the funding work? How do the people join in? What are they working on? How long are they working on it? What comes out of it? Walk us through that.
It's
the lay of the land.
That makes perfect sense. So it's a great idea that unfortunately comes from an even greater need, and one that I think, as great as Hacking for Defense is nationally, and unfortunately the need is even greater than I think the product that we're creating. So it comes out of Stanford University 4 years ago. Steve Blank, of course, extremely successful entrepreneur, startup, and author. Pete Newell at a company called BMNT. Colonel Pete Newell, retired, coming out of the Army's Rapid Equipping Force. And their thinking was, hey, the things that we teach in Lean Launchpad for startups in the technology startup space are actually just methods for solving problems. In the same way that the scientific method has been used to solve all kinds of and be the basis of social science. And the Lean Launchpad method is a way to think about problems. So what if we applied that model and that dynamism to real-world national security problems? And not only that, let's get out of, and for all the greatness, and being a veteran, having spent a lot of time in the defense world, I know that greatness, the greatness that our warfighters bring to the country. Let's get out of the defense circle. Let's intellectually get out of our own customs, culture, and incentive structure and think differently about defense. So this is the idea. Let's take the Lean Launchpad method, apply it in close collaboration with national security agencies, and let's solve a real-world problem in 16 weeks with a bunch of students. And for them, they get 2 things. One, here at CU Boulder at least, it's competitive admission. We had 56 students, average GPA of 3.6, 11 Eagle Scouts, veterans, business students, engineers, all types and flavors, from a sophomore in English to 5 PhD students. It is the best of the university, and we give them a leadership experience. And at the end of that, we hope we also produce some thinking for the national security community that they would otherwise not have. And one last plug that I think makes this, again, I say the need is so much greater than the product, even though the quality of the product is high, is we live in a changing world, and the military and civilian worlds are converging at such a rate that traditional security thinking is not going to get us there, at least in my opinion.
Right, not. Yeah. Well, I asked the direct question. You oversaw readiness. Are we ready?
I think in a word, no, and that's a pretty sobering thought, and I think with some sad or troubling, I should say, historical precedent. And what I mean by that is, the United States has a history of being unready for war, and there are pathologies in peacetime that sort of prevent us from lifting the fog of peace and thinking clearly about war. And there's no way to I mean, you can dance around this with euphemisms. That means we lose warfighters who would otherwise be with their spouses and children who are in the ground because we didn't think right about war before it came. So this haunted me as the DASD for readiness, this question of are we ready? And I think the short answer is no, and I think it actually, it gets worse, which is that I'm of the opinion that we live in an age of increasing, or we'll see increasing frequency and severity of disruption, chiefly brought on by technology, that will challenge large bureaucracies to adapt in ways that they are not traditionally or candidly culturally or incentivized to adapt to. So I think this is the great challenge of our age. It's not cybersecurity, it's not AI, it's one level deeper than this of what is the system we have built to make strategic decisions about cybersecurity, AI, whatever is next after this, and they'll come with increasing frequency. And we'll be competing in that space not only with China and Russia, and I think if you look at Russian actions in Crimea, take Crimea without firing a shot, they're thinking more keenly about this new world than we are. And then, of course, the other great challenger in that space will be non-state actors, terrorists, insurgents, who are much like startups. They are burdened by. They will take a COTS drone off the shelf and find a way to innovate in a way that a large organization, and God bless them, like the United States Navy, would struggle to do so. So this is our great challenge in my mind.
It was one of the great observations I made working at NATO. There's a lot of talk about how, why do we have the smaller nations? The United States is such a large nation. We're able, with our resources and our capabilities, to do so much. But what I observed as I sat in those meetings, these smaller nations have some agility we don't. They can try things we can't. They can do it more simply and easily and more cheaply, and then we benefit from some of that information. And so when we think of it more of a system, I think what we find is a much better matching of all the capabilities. And so to that point, your comments of these non-state actors and individuals or communities that otherwise would never have been able to compete are able to make real disruption and real problems. And we're not ready to spin on a dime.
No, that's right. And I think, but we could be. And I actually think we have, what is America? America, we are the creators. We are the dynamic. We're the ones who brought, we are the capital of innovation. So it's not a matter, I think the good news is, it's not a matter of actually building things that we don't have.
Yes.
It's a matter of thinking differently about what we do have. And to your point on NATO and alliances, I read the news on this with great sadness as I see, hey, there's a world in which the comparative advantage of an alliance system leads to an outstanding outcome. Or there's a world where alliances crumble, trust is diminished, and we all just make miniature copies of each other, terribly redundant, intellectually insular and repetitive, and when we lose that. And Secretary Mattis made this point, and left over this point, that this was a traditional strength of the United States that added to our power, bolstered deterrence, while not having to spend warfighter lives to do so. And I think that's now something that we could bring back. Those pieces are in place.
I completely agree. I keep saying my message is simple. We have all the resource and capabilities. We need innovation. A lot of people don't know we have 179 innovation groups inside of government. It takes care of, it's reportedly has affected 60% of our economic growth over history. I mean, this is the culture of our country, but we're not connecting the dots. Right? To your point, we can work together and have this great outcome, or we can work against each other and actually reduce our impact. So we think if we bring these 2 points together, how is it that, not just hacking for defense, but conceptually, these mini units of attacking these key difficult problems, how do we think about that scaling out? Right? I love the initial impact, and I love the idea that we're building these leaders. What if we thought more broadly? What would you imagine?
Yeah, so I think about this a lot, actually, and as you might, maybe I have a dog in the fight, but we think about innovation, we think about California, we think about Boston, we think about New York. I think that this nation has a rich, innovative history, and here in Colorado, we're in the middle of it. So I think there's been we've seen the critique, we've heard the critique that we're not a country of two coasts. We're a country of everyone, and yet we're not accessing the talent that lies out there. And or I should say, I mean, from government. I mean, people go out and they have dynamic careers. They create value in the commercial sector, and we are all better for it. But government's not getting its share of that talent. And it's not attracting it. We have wonderful people, but and I saw this in the military at length. I mean, we recruit from well-stocked pools, and military service has become a family business, and those families honor us with their service. But we need a broader swath of the American experience in uniform, out of uniform, in government, out of government, in a permeable relationship with government where their expertise can be a part of national service without being a binary choice of being a government employee or a civilian. It's time for fresh thinking in these models.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. So ironically, I feel like I didn't pay you to say that. I had set out to write, so each month I write a strategy, and I intended to write a military strategy. And I thought, well, this will be really easy because I know a lot of this space, and I know a lot of the strategies that exist. And then I thought, why am I changing some of the things that are working? This exercise shouldn't be about change just for change's sake. So I decided I needed to affirm actually just a number of the strategies that already existed, and then thought, what's missing though? And I came back to this analogy that I tell often. It's a story about my daughter playing lacrosse. And at one point, the coach pulls the goalie.
I was a lacrosse goalie.
Oh, were you? Oh, how funny. Well, I have to tell people, especially in Colorado, it's not the same as in hockey where we intentionally pull the goalie, right? So he pulls the goalie, and we're all thinking, oh no, what has happened, right? We're all protective of both the goalie and the goalie's mom, and we're thinking something has happened to this girl. And come to find out, the coach was trying to make a point, and the point was this: the goalie is your last resort. Do not get on this field and assume and rely on the goalie only. Every single girl on the field has a position, has a capability, and is expected to be the first line of defense. And as I thought about that, I said, I don't need a new military strategy, I need a service strategy. And so what I started writing up is, we need to start recognizing across the country, every single American is a player on this team. And everybody is expected to do something to be beneficial. That may be in military service, but it may be in civilian service, or it may be in community service. It may be putting your talents out there. But however it is, we need to start helping people understand the ownership that they have in defending and protecting and evolving this country.
Contributing to, it's funny, there's echoes of Kennedy in that.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment.
You should. It's interesting. I hadn't thought of this previously, but a thread that connects to that is it Steve Pinker who wrote Drive, the new science of motivation?
Oh, yes.
Wonderful big data work on. Do you know what people want? And I think part of this is a function of the growth of material wealth in the country over the last 2 generations. But now, people want meaning in work.
Yes, they do.
Look what, I forget the Economist article last week where they were talking about big corporate heads actually changing some of the fundamental premises. And maybe this is rhetorical or maybe it's not, but we are not just creating profit for shareholders. We are a part of a larger mission, part of a larger drive. And I bring that up to say, hey, if what people are hungry for, in addition, of course, to economic growth and well-being that supports our families and feeds us, but people want meaning.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the bad and good news is there's plenty of worthy fights out there. There's great work to be done, and if you're hungry for meaning in your life, take a look outside. There's plenty of people who could use your talents.
I completely agree, but we need to create the conduit for it, right? We need to create the space in which people can participate. And so I ran into a situation, actually we talked about this before we were on camera, that one of the large companies, I had called them to interview for one of the projects we were working on, and they said, why would we want to work with the US government? And I said, everybody says yes. It actually threw me. I thought everybody says yes. Why are they saying no? And they said, we're large enough now. We impact governments. And I thought, goodness, that's probably true. How do we handle this? So that led me to thinking about who are the types of people that get into running these really, really large startup companies that grow into, multi-country or fully global groups. And what I came to the conclusion was, I call them mind racers. There are people who love to solve problems. And I said, you know why you want to work with the US government? Because we have an unlimited set of problems.
I think that's true.
But it is, and so, I make a joke of it, but the reality is, if we could create the opening for people to bring their talents, not because they just want to be political or because they feel an obligation, but because there's meaning in actually helping to solve these issues. It sounds like the program you're starting is focused on defense, but could it focus on environment? Could it focus on healthcare? Could it focus on culture change?
Yes, so it's a wonderful, so two quick points. The short answer to your question is yes. I think, and this is an issue for us that I think we've seen in lots of different domains. The problem is, in our current structure, the Department of Defense is the funded agency that has the funding and wherewithal and bandwidth to take on these kinds of projects in a way that I've never worked in the Department of the Interior, but I would wonder if they had, just by the nature of sort of the funding profiles of the different organizations. That's a fixable problem.
Completely.
Which is good news. And it's also, by the way, that's not a big ticket item. So that's point one. Point two, I would say, is a philosophical one, if you'll forgive me for it. It's that I think people think that there are problems in government because of government malfunction. And I take issue with that. I mean, certainly we can always improve any large organization. My wife works for Microsoft. We have seen these in the large corporate sphere. We've seen these in government. Large organizations do some things very well. They need a level of disruption to stay current. But I think what people forget, the fundamental, I see this in foreign policy all the time. Hey, foreign policy isn't hard because we're not good at it. It's hard because the world is hard, and the world changes quickly. And the other players on the field, by the way, are no dummies either.
Right.
And so we don't have problems because we're just continually fumbling the football. We have problems because the other football team's also quite good, yes. And the world is changing. So, and that's a hopeful message that I think actually Americans in the 1950s, 1960s understood. And I think the middle of the country is more in line with that, but it's been lost. And let me bring that back to one other point. You spoke about the relationship between large tech firms and governance. I think that notion that firms are going to do more governing and have a greater say, that's true. In fact, there was an Economist article last week or the week before, it was the cover articles on this. But I think it's incomplete insofar as we need to go back to our introduction to macroeconomics course. The nation provides the system in which businesses like that can thrive, and the health of the nation is deeply connected, even to multinational, international corporations. The system of education that creates the talent, the system of laws that sustains the ability for contracts and sort of stability to be in place, the infrastructure, all kinds of things that I think a post-national perspective on is actually incorrect to the point of being potentially dangerous. As in, when those things are taken for granted, they will atrophy. So it's like this notion of, I think again, 2 generations ago, they understood a symbiosis between government and business that was mutually supporting.
Yes.
I think in the current national conversation, we've lost some of that.
We absolutely
and it's unfortunate because to your previous great point, we're on the same team.
Absolutely.
And we're certainly on the same ship. And that ship is going to sink or float on our efforts.
Yes. I can, kind of end on a high note, say, as I often say, that by my travels, I get to talk to people, and I although we put a lot on camera, there are also conversations I have behind the scenes. And I am finding that on both sides of the aisle, They do not care if it's Democrat or Republican. They're starting to see that this erosion will affect long-term their ability to act as a high-functioning company. And they're starting to say, I'm here to listen now. And I want to get more engaged. And I really don't care which side of the aisle, because ultimately, we all share the same child. Right? We all share this country.
That's right.
And if we don't hold on to it, and we don't protect it, and we don't all bring our best A game to the team is going to interfight and take itself down.
And that affects you, and to my mind, and maybe I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, whether you're the head of a tech firm, whether you're in the defense sphere, whether you're in the university sphere, whether you're a single mother, that lowering tide brings all ships down. But again, I'm hopeful insofar as it would be a different world if we didn't have the pieces. If we didn't have the intellectual capital of this nation, the cultural capital of this nation, it would be a harder conversation if those pieces weren't in place. It's a matter of actually bringing them together in a way that works, which is a better problem to have than having to create it.
That's right. We need an architect.
Ah!
Thank you so much for joining us, Lloyd. This has been great.
Cheers. Good to see you.